Here is Daring Dustbunnies set up for a 2 to 3 player game. You can see that there are 3 player boards. This is for 3 players. The only difference in setup would be the number of player boards, and in 2 to 3 players you have 2 room tiles. In a 4 player game you would have 3 room tiles, and in a 5 player game you'd have 4 room tiles. The tiles are all double sided and have different amounts of spaces on them, and you are provided with 5 tiles, so you have got opportunity for mix and match as necessary. In the actual setup, all that you actually need to do is to deal each player 2 characters. One they choose to play face up, the other one they would have face down, which is their player board. Every player gets 4 move cards. Every player starts with a static wire of shocking ability. You just need the board set up with all of the dust bunnies set up here, and the charms and move deck placed appropriately. And finally, the cat token and dog token placed next to the board as necessary. You do still need all the fate cards that are not used in the game as well. The object of the game is really simple. You have got one dust bunny that you are fated to. You need to get them as close to the vacuum cleaner without having them end up in the vacuum itself. Not as easy as it sounds, as all of your fated objectives are completely secret, and the round only ends when all dust bunnies are off of the start space and at least one is in the tube or in the bag. At that point, the round would end. All players would reveal their fate to establish who they were fated to, and medals would be distributed based on who was closest to the vacuum, who was second closest, who was third closest. It is on a scale of gold, silver, bronze. And that happens 3 times over, with each round having a complete reset, new boards being set up, players being given new fate tokens to determine who they're trying to get as close to the vacuum cleaner as possible. And realistically, that happens 3 times over, and then the winner is whomever has got the most gold tokens, and if there's a tie, silver tokens, and if there's a tie, most bronze tokens, and if for some reason there's a tie there, the most static. Now, static is a resource that you gain throughout the game by doing certain things. So when you use one of your abilities, so in example, you start off with a wire of shocking, but you can collect more charms, which also use static. In example here, the paintbrush of disguise uses 4. What you do is you spend it and it goes up here in a pool. You are able to get more static by moving a dust bunny onto a space containing another dust bunny, and when you do that you would gain 1 static. Normally you'd then collect it from the pool there. There is a finite amount of this resource though. There are 3 per player, and that is it for the entire game. Every player starts with 3, so in this example there will be 9 static available. If the blue dust bunny is here and I move the black one to here, I need to gain a single static. I need to get it from somewhere. I can't get it from the resource pool. We can't have any more added into the game. So I would take it from another player and add it to my own. What's more is that this static actually uses these abilities and then they're discarded. So even with things like the wire of shocking, the thing that you start with, once you've used that, it would be discarded out of the game. It does really change the game though. These charms are described in the rules as a way to cheat. And they aren't really cheating, you are just giving yourself a bit of an advantage, but they really do change the odds, and especially if you have been put into a position where everybody knows who you're fated to, which dust bunny you're trying to save effectively, get as close to the vacuum as possible, you're going to want to use those as much as possible. Let's go through some of the move cards as well. So on a player's turn, they will move a dust bunny by playing a single card. And there are 3 different types of card. You have dust bunny cards, which may look like this. They have a number and a colour dust bunny associated to them, and the number dictates how far the bunny moves. So in the example, if you played the brown 1, the brown dust bunny would move 1, the yellow 1, the yellow dust bunny would move 3. Your other cards are the dog and the cat, which, as you can see here, the dog allows you to move a fluff ball 1, 2, 3 or 4 spaces backwards, or move the dog 1 room, and you can only use that on a dust bunny that is inside of the actual room with the dog. And the Talisman of Truth, which, if you've got both of them, you can make a guess on an opponent and they have to tell the truth. If you don't and you have to play this card, you have to reveal. And when I say have to play, it's because you don't draw cards until you have run out. So your turn may consist of playing this, next round you play this, next round you play this, final one, you have no choice but to play this, so you would have to reveal which Dust Bunny you are actually betting on. Which seems really tricky because you can't gain new cards until afterwards. But if you've noticed, on these spaces there are actual instructions on what you need to do. So you will play your turn and you may play a yellow 3. So let's move the yellow Dust Bunny 3. 1, 2, 3. It then says play again, which means that you play a second card. And we may choose to play the brown 1, which allows us to move the brown Dust Bunny 1. And now on a new one which says dump. So we dump a card, and I'm definitely going to be dumping that talisman to ensure that I am not stuck with it at the end of the round, or when I need to play it. There are also give spaces where you can give people a card, take spaces where you can take them, reveal where you will flip over a single card from there and immediately resolve it as well. It does mean there's a lot of tactics available for such a simple concept. And these actual boards themselves, so each Dust Bunny has a unique ability. So an example of this one, Tina Tinsel. Once a game, it's Christmas. During your turn, you may take all of the static. So that is a once a game. Whereas Needle, you can choose to use a movement card of the value 1 to move a fluff ball backwards 1 space, which is really important because fluff balls only move forwards. Unless you're using a specific ability, be it a charm or be it a Dust Bunny ability, they're only going to move forwards. And Little Bud, you can play 2 movement cards of the same colour as a single move for the combined value. So if you had a 4 and a 3 for brown, you could play that as a 7 and play them both together. You'll notice though they have got 2, and I did say earlier they are drawn 2. After each round they may choose to utilise a different one. So once per round you may reverse a movement card and send a fluff ball backwards. And that's once a round, and that actually comes with its own card of whether the power is ready or power is used. Doesn't for the rest of them that only have once a game, but I think that's because they may have been Kickstarter additions within. So if we were to fabricate a quick round of this game, let's start off left to right and have a look at what we can do. So, Little Bud is fated to, and I'm going to reveal all of these, yellow. Needle is fated to black, and Tinsel is fated to brown. Now these would be secret, which means that these 3 players would not know who everyone is looking after. Being quite obvious and saying I'm going to try and get yellow as close to the end as possible may look like you're trying to get them in the vacuum, but if you then spend abilities to send them backwards, particularly with the Wire of Shocking, which has the ability of move a fluff ball backwards a number of spaces equal to all of your static, it's going to be quite obvious who you're trying to save. But Little Bud needs to save yellow, so he's going to choose to use his ability to play 2 cards of the same colour and play a 1 and a 4 blue to move that blue 5. So we will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I want a move space, which allows us to move 1 fluff ball. And I'm going to choose to move the blue 1 space. I can now reveal or flip, and it's the dog's bark. I could choose to move any fluff ball in his space backwards, or I could choose to move him, and I'm going to choose to move the dog itself. So the dog and the cat are in the same room now. We then move on to Needle's turn, and Needle's cards consist of this. Well, Needle needs to get black as close as possible, and Needle doesn't have a black card. She has a yellow, a green, a cat, and a pink. So we'll play the pink, and we'll move 1, 2. Needle can now take a card. She will take blindly, and she actually takes the talisman, which is something that she's going to quite wince at. We then move on to Tina Tinsel, who has the other half of the talisman, but wouldn't know what Needle has got, maybe from a facial expression, but you never know. Tina Tinsel has got a brown card. Oh, we have got an extra card there. So would want to play that, and would play a 1 brown to move the brown onto the board. And then she would dump that talisman to get rid of it. Back to Little Bud, who has only got 1 card, so he will play a black 3, which will move him 1, 2, 3. He has no cards to play, so he would not be able to. But he has run out of cards, which means next turn he will restock, and he'll also be able to get a charm if he wishes. Needle has still got 4 cards because she took 1 earlier. She is going to choose to play a yellow 2. That would be 2. She'll be able to take. She'll take from Tina Tinsel because she's the only one with any cards. Tina Tinsel only has 1 card, so she would have to play the 3 yellow, which is 1, 2, 3. She can move any dust bunny. Well, she's going to choose to move blue into the tube because blue is nothing to do with her. She's anything hoping that she's going to put one of these other 2 players on edge. You can get out of the tube. You cannot get out of the bag. Little Bud at the minute does not have any cards, so we're going to have to draw back up. So he will draw 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. Because he's got a wire, he has to take a random charm. If he didn't have a wire because he'd spent it, he could choose to take a wire. And he has got the Paintbrush of Disguise, which we saw earlier. Change the colour of a movement card as you play it from your hand, which is quite handy. But he's only got 3 static. He needs 4 for that. It's still his turn though, and he has now got capacity to move that yellow if he wants, but that's going to look very suspicious. So instead he's going to use a combination of these 2 to move black 6, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now normally, in a play, you'd go 5, 6. You stop on the tube. You need a single movement or a movement of more to move beyond that. That has no abilities and it would end Little Bud's turn. It's now Needle's turn. And Needle will be in a bit of a panic because she is fated to the black dust bunny who is currently in the tube, which means that they would score no points. She can get him out of the tube if she's able to use her wire or use an ability to bring him back. Now she will play this green card just to get things started, and she will move this 1, 1, 2. Now normally she'd be able to take, but because she's sharing a space with another fluff ball, that doesn't happen, and instead she would be able to take a single static off of someone. And then we might check for round end by this point, and we'll be looking and saying, is anybody still on start? No. Is anybody in the bag or the tube? Yes. 2 things that we need to end, but they all need to be on unique spaces. That green isn't on a unique space, which means that he would stop the game from ending. For her final motion in her turn, Needle might say, I'm going to use the Wire of Shocking to move my dust bunny back. She probably won't say my, but she'll say a dust bunny back. And it'd be quite obvious which one she's trying to save when she uses her 4 static, all of her static, to move this dust bunny 1, 2, 3, 4. And any time a dust bunny, or a fluff ball if you will, lands on one of these spaces, you activate it. And that's a play. There is still scope for her to do something that might get her a point. So she might say, I am going to choose to use the cat to move green 2 spaces forward. Which would end the game, because no dust bunnies, fluff balls are on the start position. Every fluff ball dust bunny, whichever one flavour you want to call it, I know I've been interchanging this, is on a unique spot, and at least 1 is inside the tube or the bag. So we then establish who is looking after what, who is fated to what, and they would all reveal. And there would no doubt be groans from everybody, apart from Little Bud, who has managed to be in a position of being first. Green, even though has no association to anybody, would still be allocated silver, and black would gain bronze. All fates would be revealed and everything would be resolved, which would mean that Little Bud would have a gold medal, nobody would have a silver medal, but Needle would get that bronze medal. With the round ended, everything would be reset, new cards would be drawn, all fluffball dust bunnies would be at the start position, and players would be able to choose whether they flip over to their other player side. They keep all their charms unless spent. They don't regain any static. It carries on over to the next round. So if you have used a crazy ability like Tina Tinsel's, you might start the entire next round with 9 static, which is going to put you in a massively advantageous position. This continues 3 times over until all medals have been allocated, at which point whichever player has got the most gold wins. If it's a tie, of those 2 players, whoever's got the most silver. If for some unforeseen reason that's also a tie, most bronze out of those 2 players. Again, if for some strange reason that's also a tie, whoever has the most static. And that is how you play Daring Dustbunnies. We found Daring Dustbunnies to be incredibly engaging and highly tense. There was a lot of tension created through the fact that everybody's motive is secret, but all the actions are visible. So an example, you may be fated to the yellow fluff ball, but all of your cards will not aid you in that. They may be entirely oriented around moving the blue fluff ball. Through that, you could effectively move the yellow one as a byproduct of spaces, but your card actions will be the ones that people will be reading, and if they read into it too much, they may end up culling the blue fluff ball, sending them right into the vacuum cleaner, and your yellow one is completely safe and fine. There's no moment where there's any downtime and anybody has got the opportunity to become disengaged. Because everybody's actions count towards the end goal, and you can affect everybody else's fluff ball, it means that you always have to be on your toes. You can't act during other people's turns, which I did think was a bit of an odd thing to say that you've got these fantastic charm cards that you've got available to you. But at the same time, the fact that you're having to watch, it means you've got to pre-plan. And if by some unforeseen circumstance your fluff ball is put into the vacuum cleaner, you're not out. You still have got the opportunity to ruin other people's days. Or if they are only in the tube, on your turn you have got scope to try and drag them back if you can. We found that, considering lockdown, and most of our games being at 2-player as well, it does work really well at 2-player. We didn't actually have any instance at a 2-player game where one of us thought, game over. If anything, we found it more engaging, particularly when we had that mass control. With such a small player count, we had a lot more dictatorship over which fluff ball moved when and where. We weren't then concerned about who else was going to do anything. It was a to and fro. Whilst also managing to keep things secret, it really flourished at 2-player. That said, I can see it being incredibly funny and incredibly engaging at more. Because there is scope for those secrets to unfold and for people to become quite devoted to making sure their fluff ball makes it to the closest part of the board, you're going to have a lot of instances where people are going to be visibly frustrated, visibly excited. There's not really going to be many instances where someone is going to be playing the game and lose all hope. Even in that 3rd round, unless of course someone else has already won 2 gold medals, that 3rd round could still be the clincher where they get a gold medal and could still win the game. Nobody's out, which I think is fantastic. Losing your fluff ball does lead to that level of freedom where you are able to mess about with other people's, but it is player elimination, which is something I am not a fan of. That said, I didn't feel like it was pure player elimination in itself. Because the rounds are so quick, and because it is done over 3 rounds, the likelihood of your fluff ball being put into the vacuum cleaner 3 times in a row is incredibly slim. If that is the case, chances are you're playing the game wrong and you are letting people in on which your fluff ball is. The use of the charms I found was incredibly handy as well. They were balanced enough to, warrant you get one and they're great, but they are cheating. The rulebook says ways to cheat, and the charms are the ways to cheat. Luckily, even though these are incredibly overpowered and incredibly useful tools, they are one-time use. Even the wire is one-time use. So if you save your fluff ball using that wire, it's gone, which means that there is no saving grace afterwards and no chance of you getting them back during that round. You've lost the wire, unless of course you can perform a miracle, everybody's going to cotton on to the fact that you are trying to save that one. That's the one you're fated to. There were some instances where I didn't feel the charms were needed, but that was often because I was in a great position, or because I didn't have enough static. My partner was very good at moving the fluff balls to a specific location so that she didn't trigger any extra effects, because as great as the board is for having a chain reaction of play, take, give, etc., sometimes those are effects that you don't want. In the example of the gameplay where someone was given or took a talisman card, that meant that if they had to play it, they'd have to reveal what their fluff ball was, which is really not what you want to do. So by making sure that those fluff balls landed on each other's spaces, she gained static, which meant that her charms would have been more effective and quite often more powerful. The quality of this game it's really good, to be fair. I wasn't much of a fan of the artwork in all the places. Sometimes the art did feel a bit of a lower caliber than other elements. But that's forgiven because the actual aesthetic for the game is that you are dust bunnies trying to make fluff balls get as close to a vacuum cleaner as possible. It's not really one where you'd think that is the art style for that. The actual characters were illustrated beautifully. I thought they were very charming. The use of little tiny meeples for the actual fluff balls I thought was great as well. I thought it was a really lovely touch. And I don't know if you noticed, but those were stickers stuck on. You get a selection of 9 stickers to 6 fluff balls, which means that if it were to be a family game and everybody had a favourite colour, they could choose an eye to stick onto that. It does then lead into that concern where you think this fluff ball is mine, I need this fluff ball to win, I'm playing as this fluff ball, when in reality you are just betting on them. And I feel like being able to detach yourself from that is more important than making them look good. Everything was incredibly sturdy. I liked the fact that the board didn't interlock. At first I did believe that an interlocking system, as in like a little jigsaw slot on each board, would have been much better. But as the game went on, I found it was much easier to just pick up, put down and get a new one and put in place without that interlocking system. There's also that concern with, as great as an interlocking system would be, you may risk sliding, crushing, moving or adjusting them to a point where you might bend the card. Which I'd be impressed if you did, to be fair, because it is really thick card. I was astounded at the quality of the actual production of the board. The interaction between players in this game, though, is really weird. Everything is done openly, but everything is secret at the same time. You can't directly affect another player in an intentional form. Everything is almost accidental. So with that, you play a card to move the blue fluff ball 3 spaces. That's going to upset someone, possibly. But you're not doing it to upset that person. You're doing it because that isn't your fluff ball. You want them in the vacuum so the round can end. Or you're playing it because it's the only card you've got available to you. Or you're playing it so you can trigger effects or gain static. It is all for personal gain or motive. And sometimes you are just playing cards because it's what you've been dealt. But at the same time, that's going to affect someone. And I really like that. I like the fact that it's almost got to take that edge inside of it without it being an intentional take, that you can't target to upset someone. There are instances where you can. So, as example, someone reveals their fate and tells everybody who they are, or they're forced to, or you figure it out, and then you might want to mess about with them if your fluff ball is gone. But ideally, it's a game about pushing your own luck and making you have the best position of the board, not about putting someone else behind on purpose. It is almost like you are just all clawing for gold regardless to the collateral, which I thought was really lovely actually, despite the theme. There is also that element of the secrecy needing to be thorough. So, in example, you can't be a one-trick pony. You cannot just constantly play cards to make your fluff ball as close to the vacuum cleaner, because if it works once, it won't work a second time. Everybody reveals their fate at the end, everybody sees who everyone was, and they can say, well, actually I can see now why you were pushing yellow to the end. If on the next round you start pushing green to the end, people are then going to make it so green loses. At the same time, there is scope for playing it on the fly. As I've said, you get cards, you're dealt them, you have to deal with it. Yeah, you can be a bit tactical and play cards so that your certain fluff balls land on certain spaces of the board to enable you to manipulate other fluff balls. But again, if you're then going to just constantly manipulate that green one so it's in the best position, people are going to cotton on. And with that, because at least one fluff ball needs to be in the tube or in the vacuum itself, you are going to have to force someone there. And if anything, that can be to your advantage, not only to end the round when you're in the best position, but also to make other people believe that your motives are something else, that you're not trying to get that green one to the end, you're trying to get the blue one or the yellow one or the red one, for example. You are going to be watching other people throughout the entire game, and the interaction will always be there in the conversations that happen before, during and after, and the actual engagement of watching people's faces as you play a card and watching them either wince or, really cheerily smile knowing that they're now in first position because you've just got rid of the brown fluff ball into the vacuum cleaner. It does make for really, really good conversation, But at the same time, the level of secrecy that is being used inside the game is astounding, and it's almost like the player interaction is sometimes done so subtly through people's body language that it makes for a different calibre of game. And if anything, by removing that player interaction, that discussion, that targeting, it makes it a much more suitable family game than it does a hardcore take that player's game. So, would we recommend this game? And my answer is an outright yes. Yes, I would. Absolutely. 100%. I'd only recommend it as a family game though. As much as we engaged with it as a duo, just two of us, and really enjoyed it, we can see this being a fantastic cool down or warm up or just a really, really casual game for our group of gamers. But it isn't a game that, as a big group of hobby gamers, that we would choose to play. We aren't going to go out of our way and say, would everybody like to come round and play Daring Dustbunnies? It's probably a game we'd play as the starting game, or as just we've got 20 minutes, let's just quickly play this. As a family game though, yeah, this is a game that I would say I really want to play with my family. I really want to play with my younger cousins, or I want to play with my son when he's old enough. I want to play it with my parents, even as old as they are and as old as I am. It is one of those games where it is really, really, really casual, but it gives you that air of being a hobby gamer, if you can catch what I'm saying. You don't feel like it's got that heavy commitment of needing to know all the intricacies, ins and outs and mechanics, but because it's so easy to access, you're able to grasp them easily. And it's just a really lovely, appealing, well-made game that I feel like it would thrive in a family setting, but in a hobby gamer setting, it would probably come out once a month, unfortunately. I personally really enjoyed Daring Dustbunnies, and it is going to be one of those games that I will say, let's have a warm-up, or we've got 20 minutes while we're just having a cup of coffee or something. Let's get this out and play it. The pack-up set down is so speedy, teaching the game is almost instantaneous, and it's engaging from start to end. Is it a game that I probably play on repeat? Yeah, definitely. I can see myself playing 2, 3, 4 games of this, but the caution is that it could wear thin. With families, however, it is one of those games where you would play and children would want to play it again and again and again because they want their fluff ball to get to the end. But again, it's that detachment from knowing that not all the fluff balls are yours. Because you have picked the colour red for every game in history does not mean the red fluff ball is the one you want to win. I would recommend Daring Dustbunnies. I really enjoyed playing it. I'm really grateful to Hopwood Games for sending me the review copy. And if you're interested in it, I really recommend that you take a look at it. Thank you for sticking around.